All right. Hope you enjoyed the dinner. If you want any, again, leftovers, grab those now because Julie is packing it up here, but we can certainly feed you some more if you need it. So before we get started, did everyone get a bag of stuff? Anybody, any camper not get a bag of stuff? Yeah, nothing? Okay. Inside your bag, you will find several things. You will find a copy of the Camp Handbook. We have made a couple of minor changes to that since it was printed, but keep that around. The instructions for your kit builds tomorrow morning are in that book, as well as all the schedules, the maps, and everything, so make sure you keep that around. There's a plastic bag in there that has some information about the county that we're in, Butler County, and different things that you can do, so you can read through that at your leisure. You'll also find in there a little waterproof bag for your phone or handheld, or we have plenty of those if you would like a second one and use one for your handheld and one for your phone. We do have those. You'll find a square sticker. The square sticker is a special sticker. It is waterproof, so that's for your bag. So if you want to put a Yoda sticker on your waterproof bag, use the square one, okay? And then we gave you a couple of the little circular logo Yoda stickers to have. And then you have a hat from DX Engineering, which is one of our sponsors. And you also have one from R&L Electronics, which is another one of our sponsors. Your official camp shirt is in there. We'll talk about that. There's also a shirt from Heil Sound in there, and the ICOM shirts are arriving shortly, so we'll get those to you later. But just wanted to let you know what all of that stuff is, especially the square sticker, because it's waterproof and doesn't say anything about it. So wanted to make sure you all have that. So I want to talk a little bit about Yoda. Some of you know all about Yoda, some of you do not. So I'm going to give a little bit of a quick rundown of what we're doing here and why we're here. And this is some statistics that Sterling N0SSC back here on the camera came up with. Looking at the data on ham radio, and you know, we're looking at this 15 to 24 range, and it's pretty low. And so that's what we're working on. Yoda is not like a club that you join. It is not a membership thing. There are no dues. We're just a group of hams working to recruit, but mostly retain young amateur radio operators. So we provide activities like this one, like December Yoda Month, to get opportunities out there for young people to participate. This started over in Europe. It became a project of IARU Region 1. They stepped in to help, and then we had a couple of people, Sterling, who's back here on the camera, and Sam, KC2LRC, who was supposed to be here, but he came down with COVID last week, and so he is not here. But they went over to attend one of these camps over in Austria. And they came back and wrote this monster report of everything that they did and all the recommendations and everything, and tried to get it started. And there was some resistance to that. And so one day we were talking about it, and I said something about, well, maybe I could do that. And here we are. So, watch what you say, because you never know, when you may end up taking on a big project like this. Is it youngsters or youth? Well, it's a cultural difference. One of the things that was in that big report that Sterling and Sam came up with was that in Europe, youngsters is kind of the favored term for young people, where here, it sounds like, some old guy yelling, "Get off my lawn," those youngsters. Well, yeah, those whippersnappers. So they suggested that we change the Y to youth. So youngsters on the air, youth on the air, same program, different places, basically. But what makes Yoda different from most amateur radio organizations is this first thing. It's youth-led. And this year we're transitioning from more of the adults doing things into even more of this being youth-led and youth-planned. We started off with 4 co-founders, myself, Sterling, Sam, and Jocelyn, who's over here. And we planned everything and ran the camp. Then we added 4 young people this year to train as we do our jobs and get them involved to take over the future of the camp. We've found, and there's scientific evidence for this, that students and young people will tend to ask their peers before they ask an adult. And so that's the idea. And so a lot of times I will be hiding in my kitchen that I fondly call my office for the week, because this isn't about me, this is about you. We could have some world-class people, and I've had all kinds of world-class ham radio operators in all these different fields that are just jumping at the chance to come and teach here and conduct workshops. And I tell them, I would love to hear you, but that's not the premise of Yoda. And so it's very different that, the young people are going to be doing most of the sessions. And, our goal is always all. We don't always hit that, but we kind of met a minimum standard of at least half. And so you're going to see a lot of your peers, your campers, leading sessions on different days. And that's one of the big things. So it's a big shift, because most of the time it's, well, let's get an expert in on this subject and let's have the expert tell us everything. And that's great. But we know that young people tend to not ask questions and get involved. And so that's what we're here to do. So 50% or more of the sessions are led by younger hams. We want to build a community of young hams that can mentor each other. So if you're working on setting up APRS and you're having trouble, hey, Jack, wait a minute, I got to be careful about that. We have 3 Jacks in this group, by the way. Jack McElroy, I need some help with my APRS. So that people that, what their passions are and what angle they have taken in ham radio, so that you have a community just like us OMs. We want to build a leadership group to take on expanding Yoda. we do not want this to be the only camp. We want sub-regional camps in every country. We want this region-wide camp to rotate places all around the region. So that's a big goal. We want to do things that otherwise would not be possible because they take too much money, too much time, too much whatever to do. We don't want to bring you here and put you in front of a radio for a week. You can go home and be in front of a radio for a week. We do want you on the radio, but we want you to experience some things that you're not going to get sitting at home by yourself. And that's what we really are all about. So we help promote all youth programs, you know, whether it's remote ham radio or yacht or whatever. We want to promote all of them, but our big thing is the summer camp, and then we also have the special event that many of you have worked on and you'll be hearing about. So we want to get all of that done. But again, this is primarily a retention program. We want to keep you in ham radio. We do not want you to be one of the statistics that, you know, you get in ham radio, you get your license, and then we never hear from you again. So that's our goal. Our website is youthontheair.org. Make sure that you check that. We post all kinds of things that are available for you to do. We have, you know, we don't offer scholarships, but we tell you about scholarships and tell you when they're due, and, you know, awards and all contests and all kinds of things. So make sure that you check that out. And of course, we're on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then YouTube. So again, our big things are the December Yoda month. That's a month long special event where people that are 25 and under are the operators. And here in the U.S., we have 4 special event call signs: K8Y, K8O, K8T, and K8A. And so you sign up for a day, and you operate however much you can that day. If it's an hour, it's an hour. If it's, you know, 8 hours, it's 8 hours. If it's 24, it's 24. But you sign up for a day, and you operate, and you get as many cues as you can. And if you want to come and do another day, you can sign up. If there's room, you can do another day. So there's all kinds of opportunities for you there. Then the summer camp right now is geared toward ages 15 to 25. My next project is to get one for under 15. We're looking at a long weekend along with a parent. And so it will be kind of a miniature version of this. So we're working on that. We're hopefully a year or two away from that taking place. And then Youngsters on the Air has the Yoda contest, and they encourage participation all around the world. The first round just happened a few weeks ago, actually during Hamvention. The next one is July 23rd. So make note of that. And then December 30th is during December Yoda month. So that's kind of like the last opportunity to rack up the cues with the contest. So make sure that you get involved in these things. And if you don't know, ask us. We'll be happy to tell you. I do need to thank an awful lot of people because I cannot do this alone. This is a big, big task to put everybody here for a week. And one of those is financial. And we tiered our sponsorships this year, and ARDC gave us a grant in April to pretty much pay for the camp. ICOM is donating all the equipment that you're going to use. Everybody's going to get an ID52 handheld. We have 8 705s, ICOM 705s to use, the little portable SDRs, and then we have ICOM 7300s, and then we have the IC 7610. So we will have that available. Normally, we have a representative from ICOM here spending the week with us. Will Jourdain, AA4WJ, unfortunately his grandmother passed away on Thursday, and so he is with family, but we're going to try to Zoom him in. But we will get you the equipment and make sure that you know how to use it. The Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation gave us a substantial grant for the camp, as well as the good folks at DX Engineering, Tim Duffy, Terry Greiser, and their staff stepped up and said, we want to be the sponsor of Yoda Camp. So these four are our titanium sponsors. So we welcome you to patronize them as you can, and thank them for their support. I haven't run the numbers yet, but I will tell you last year the cost per camper was right around $1,150. You all paid $100. The rest of that money came from these people that we're talking about, these sponsors. And so say thank you, okay? I suspect that this year we're probably going to be a little over $1,200 a camper, $1,300 maybe, just because of, you know, prices going up and that kind of thing. So, you know, that $100 was not to really help pay for the camp. It was to make sure you were here. And so that's a big weight off of our shoulders from these four to pay for all of this. We also have silver sponsors, R&L Electronics, which is just 15 minutes down 129 over here. You may want to stop by there on your way out of town. They basically open up the store and say, whatever you need, take it. If it's still in good shape, bring it back. And I've done that twice here in the last couple of weeks and walked out with, I don't know how much coax, but they've really helped us. Heil Sound is helping us again this year with all of the headsets. This year they sent us all Pro 7 headsets to use, so you'll have those to use. The Dayton Amateur Radio Association gave us a nice grant, and we were appreciative of that. And Extronic USA has some wonderful digital temperature-controlled soldering stations that they have donated to the camp, and we will be using those this year. Our bronze sponsors, Swodexa, the Southwest Ohio DX Association, we want to thank them, as well as the youth activities of the Radio Club of America. So thanks to all of those corporate sponsors, and then thanks to you who are watching online, hopefully watching us online. Thank you for your contributions. People bought different things that we needed on our Amazon charity list. They donated money on podcasts. They donated money directly to us. And so we want to say thank you for making this happen. A lot of people have put in a lot of time to make this work. The museum is hosting us for the second year in a row, and we're very glad that they are. You'll be hearing more about that later. The Butler County Visitors Bureau, Youngsters on the Air, basically they just let us copy their program and encouraged us to. And so they've done a lot. Tim Duffy, K3LR, Again, DX Engineering and Worldwide Radio Foundation, Tim made it very clear that he wanted to support us, so thank you. Ward Silver, N0AX, has done a lot for our international recruiting and working with IARU. AMSAT has given us materials to use for our satellite workshops, and so we're very thankful for that. Joe Eisenberg, K0NEB, 3D printed a kit for all of you. And so we'll be building those. Bill Brown, WB80LK, is helping out the McElroys with trackers and things for the balloon launch, and Tower Electronics for some of our connectors, adapters, and accessories and that kind of thing. The planning working group are our four co-founders that I mentioned before, and then we have four young people. Frankie Bonte, KE8HPA, could not be here this week, so Frankie, we miss you and look forward to you being here next time. Jocelyn, you've already met. Adam Johnson, KD9KIS, is here, and he is the assistant director of this camp. So Adam is learning what I do and giving me all kinds of help and making sure this all happens. And so he's in training. So we look forward to his future with Yoda. Taylor Lobb, KE8KWZ, another camper from last year. He is the shack master. And so we'll be talking about that, but he'll be working with you in the shack here at the museum. Sterling Mann, N0SSC, back here on the camera, YouTubing as he usually does, and Instagramming and doing all those, yes, tweeting, okay, tweeting right now, all those social media things, and former ARRL youth editor, and is very passionate about youth in ham radio, and that's why he went over to Austria along with Sam Rose, KC2LRC, to bring this program back. And Ruth Willett, KM4LAO, will be here a little later in the week. She does our satellite stuff, and again, another camper. But these people are the ones who make the big decisions that come up with, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And we've met every month on Zoom. We've met, offline as well. They work the booths at the ham fests, and they do a lot. So I couldn't do this without this great team. Some more volunteers to thank. Again, Will, our prayers are with Will as his grandmother passed away. We have some big shoes to fill with his absence, but as with Sam, but we will do our best. Brian Eshe, WB9QVR, back here on the other camera, edited all of our highlight videos and made our promotional video for this year, and he will be doing the same this year. He will be making a highlight video of each day. And if you saw the hype video that got posted about midnight, that was Brian's work. Tom McElroy, W4SDR, is here to get all the technical stuff going on the balloon launches that Jack will be telling you about. So thank you to Mrs. WB9VPG over in the corner. Julie, make sure you are well fed, and make sure that I do what I'm supposed to do, and I remember to do what I'm supposed to do. And last year, I don't have roses up here, by the way. Last year, she got a dozen roses because we spent our first anniversary here at Yoda Camp on opening day. And so she made some sacrifices. And so when we organized this year, I said, well, we can go any week you want, but if we go the week of July 11th one more time, I may not be married anymore. And the committee immediately said, okay, we're not doing that week. So, Jamaica, here we come. We're going to finally get the honeymoon in this year. So we're going to Jamaica that week. But thank you, Julie, for running and keeping all of us well fed for the week. Orrin and Rebecca Squires, Orrin is N7WDA and Rebecca KI7TXO, are over here. And they met those of you who came in to the airport today, and they were here as just parents last year, and they just jumped in and did everything we asked. And so one of the first things we did was say, can y'all come back? And so they're back in an official capacity this year. Chris Bro, KD8YVJ, back here. Every camp director needs a great assistant director, and that's Adam. But every camp director also needs a director's assistant, and that is Chris. Chris makes those last-second R&L runs and the Kroger runs, and last year I sent him into a rather shady bags that you all got today because the bags were lost in shipping. So he's our gopher, so he is also stepping in to fill some of Sam's responsibilities, our staff photographer. So Chris will be going around taking pictures. He is also the social media person for us. Peter Fujisawa, N8PJL, is right here. He is a former camper, and he's our webmaster. So when these press releases go out, I send it to him. He puts it online, sends it out to everybody. So he's the MailChimp and the webmaster. We thank him. Bryant Rascal, KG5HVO, and Case Van Osprey, W0AAE, are our Yoda Month coordinators. Case just started last year as an assistant to Bryant, and they coordinate all the schedules and collect the logs and everything for December Yoda Month. So that's who to talk to if you want in on the special event. And Marty, NN1C, takes care of our travel arrangements and our Logbook of the World. So thanks to all of them. We have some adults that are volunteering. Dick Arnett, WB4SUV. Hopefully you'll see him on Thursday. We're a little sure he's got some illness in the family. Richard Beldick is here. AJ4VX, you'll see him in the evenings. Matt and Joe, you will meet on Friday. They will be doing the antenna build. Bob Fry, WA6EZV, you will see him tomorrow morning for the kit build. He's stepping in to do that. And then our direction finding guy. So you'll see him again on Thursday. Richard Kruder, WC8RK, is the one setting up the EME station out front. So we'll get to see that tomorrow night. Ken Schneider, KC8SWY, is right here and has agreed to come spend the week with all of you. So thank you. And Jay Slough, K4ZLE, for getting the antennas on top of the Holiday Inn. And also allowing us some remote access if we need it. So thank you, Jay. So we do have a long list of people who could not be here, and a lot of these were just in the last couple of weeks, and it's just a variety of things that couldn't happen. So I want to give a few shout outs. First of all to Sam. Sam came down with COVID, and so we're trying to fill in for him, and Will. And Frankie, we've talked about. Andy, KK4LWR, is on his honeymoon. However, they got COVID, and so they're quarantining instead of going to Alaska. So, and his brother Tony, KD8RTT, who was at the wedding and another wedding and couldn't be here. We also had some international campers that tried and tried and tried to get visas and just couldn't get visas in time to be here. So Corinne, HH2ORC from Haiti, Millie, YS1YXI, I know Millie's watching, so hi Millie. Christian K, or CM2CHR from Cuba. And then we had a guest that was coming from Croatia, Aaron Peter, 9A7AS. And his employer gave him time off in the wrong month. So he couldn't make it. And then Audrey KM4BUN, who's Jack's sister, she went and got into Georgia Tech. You know, how could she do that? Rather go to Georgia Tech than be here now. She's starting already at Georgia Tech, and so we're thrilled for her, but we miss you again. So shout out to all of them. So why in the world am I doing this? Why have I put in so much time and effort and money to make all of this happen? Well, what you may or may not know is that at one time I was a Yoda. I was 5 years old when I received my novice license, and I barely remember life without ham radio. And it became a thing. My dad and I did it together, and Mom couldn't stand to not know what we were sending in CW. And so she said, well, I'm going to learn the code. And she ended up getting her license and started in on ham radio. And so it was a family thing. And so that's something I've wanted to pass along. And so as a chemistry teacher, I started sponsoring ham radio in schools. And we've done different forums about youth. And I remember that when I was this age, a lot of people wouldn't come back to you. You send ages 5, and all of a sudden they just disappear. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be run off of a frequency because you're a kid. It happens. I don't want those experiences to overshadow what we're doing here this week. And so we want to encourage you to stick with it. Yes, there are those few out there that are going to cause some issues, but we want you to stick with it. We want you to persevere through it, and we want to help you be more confident and know each other and be able to talk to each other. I mean, you know, trying to talk to another kid when I was 5, there were probably half as many kids in ham radio at that point, and you feel alone, and feel so alone because I'm the only one in my club. I'm the only one in my area that's under 50. And so we don't want that to happen. And so that's why I'm here. As I was looking for people, you know, to talk to that were more my age, I met some incredible people along the way. And it reminds me of this one field day where we launched a balloon. So Jack, you haven't seen these pictures before, but this is my first balloon launch. We got a weather balloon from the National Weather Service. I was a chemistry major in college, so we got a hold of a tank of helium because I knew the guy in the stockroom. And this guy came up with this crazy idea of, hey, let's just string a wire to it and make it this great big vertical. This is it. This is the balloon. And we set up for field day, and we got visitors on campus that said, well, I was driving by and saw the big balloon, so I figured it must be field day. And they came by and visited. Just because there was a big weather balloon flying, because, you know, it's not every day you see a big balloon flying around. And so we had this little house that was on campus that we rented out. Our call sign was W2NAF. My first car is here in the picture, the Plymouth Horizon, or as my dad liked to call it, the motorized roller skate, which at one time had a full wave 2-meter antenna on the bumper, which, you know, stood like, 6 feet above the car. And we set up. So here's me in this field day that a bunch of us college kids organized and became friends. And one of the friends I had met on a repeater about a year or two before. On the right here, Eric Bonham in 9KDB, who became my best friend and still is to this day. We met people like Joe here on the left. And the guy who came up with this crazy idea to do this balloon vertical, Brian Esche, WB9QVR, who is sitting back here in the back of this room.
Sorry I got you into that deal.
Brian and I met, I think I was 5, you were what, 12, 13, something like that. We were about 50 miles apart, and it was, oh, hey, here's somebody kind of close to my age. And so Brian and I both feel this way, that, we knew what it was like to be alone, and we didn't like it. And so Brian, I ran into him at Hamvention and said, hey, I think we're going to have some problems doing our videos. Is there any way you can step in and do that? And he did, from his home just outside of Evansville, Indiana. And then he said, now next year I want to come and shoot the video. So here he is. But yeah, there you go. Brian, it was everything I could do to not talk about this picture last night at dinner, because he was talking about field day, and I'm just like, oh, if he only knew. I dug up the pictures and found them. So little nostalgia there, but that's why we do this. We're here for you, and that's the big goal. So that's a little bit about Yoda. I'm going to talk about rules and all that kind of thing later on. But our keynote speaker tonight is Dr. Nathaniel Frizzell, W2NAF. He is a professor at the University of Scranton, and he is the founder of HamSci. So he's going to tell you about HamSci and some places that he has traveled for that. So once I hit the right button here, here is Nathaniel.
Thank you, Neil. It's so nice to be here and to meet everyone. Okay, first thing I want you to do, if you like ham radio, I'd like you to please stand up. Hey, not bad. That's a lot more people than a lot of the groups I talked to. So now, next thing I want you to do is I want you to take a minute to talk to the other people at your table and tell each other what excites you about ham radio. Who wants to tell me what excites them about ham radio?
Talking to people.
Talking to people. Great. What else?
I should change being able to fix electronics.
What's that? One more. Why do you like ham radio?
Being able to fix electronics.
Being able to fix electronics. That's a great one. And one more. Do you have a reason?
It like ties into everything.
It ties into everything. That's great. Okay, everyone have a seat. Yeah, so we're all passionate for a reason about ham radio. And I've been really fortunate, as you're going to see, I now make my living essentially doing ham radio, which is something that's kind of difficult to do. So I'm technically a professor. Yeah, that's actually my job. I'm a professor. But I actually spend most of my time being a professor thinking about ham radio. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story and my passion and what got me into this. So this is where everything began for me. And the reason I was on a Boy Scout jamboree on the air trip back when I was 7th or 8th grade. So this is a while ago. And I was actually staying, it was a cold, wet October weekend. And this cabin, it was at this very cabin, N2BSA, had a ham radio set up with just a wire dipole out, and I heard something that sounded a little bit like this. That. So what is that? That's magic. That's magic because we can actually hear stations from all the way around the world being heard right here just by throwing a wire up in the trees from an old cabin like that. And that crackly noise, I was hooked. So this is the station you just heard, LY31A from Lithuania. I just recorded that last week, but it was that just sort of crackly noise, that unpredictable sense or unpredictable idea of you don't know who you're going to be able to talk to. That's what really got me hooked in ham radio. And I followed that passion for my entire life so far. So I got my first license in 1998, and then I got my Eagle Scout in 2001. I put that up there because it's really scouting that got me into ham radio and kept pushing me along. Eventually got my bachelor's in, I was first doing music education, but I loved ham radio so much I wanted to become an electrical engineer. My school didn't have it. Someone told me to go become a physicist because they had that major. So I did that. I got that. That eventually pushed me to get my master's and PhD in electrical engineering. I started HamSci. I did my postdoc and a research professor just doing ham radio experiments and writing about that. And I got hired as a professor at the University of Scranton again, basically just telling people about my ham radio experiments. So I'm probably best known for starting HamSci, the Ham Radio Sciences Investigation. So that's what this is. It's a group where I said, okay, hams are doing all of these interesting things. They know a lot about propagation and a lot about radios, and they've been doing experiments for years. There's a professional science community who are writing about them. There's not enough interaction between the two groups. So I created HamSci, which works to connect the ham radio community with the professional science community. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to the University of Scranton Amateur Radio Club. And one of the things I really like best about my job right now is the fact that I get to advise our radio club. We actually have our club president here tonight as a camper. So Veronica KD2UHN is one of our campers. So throughout the week, you are all going to be on HF, and maybe some of you know this stuff like at the back of your hand. Maybe some of you need a review. So I'll start off with a little review because it's going to help explain a lot of the things I talk about in the talk tonight, and it's going to explain a lot of what you're hearing on the air over the week. So how do our radio signals travel so far around the world? Well, if you're choosing the correct frequency, usually between 3 and 30 megahertz, you have this thing called the ionosphere. This is a layer of the upper atmosphere that's electrically charged because solar, ultraviolet, and X-ray energy comes down, it ionizes the neutral upper atmosphere and creates these layers of electrons and free-floating positive ions. During the day, it's more structured. You have the D, E, F1, and F2 layers. At night, you get a lot of recombination. Some things become more neutral. The ionosphere still exists. It's just a little weaker, so you get the E and the F region. And as I said, if you pick the right frequency, you can actually get your signal to travel, to refract or bend off of the ionosphere, go back down to Earth, back up again, and you can have these signals go very, very far distances, thanks to ionospheric refraction. Another thing that I want to point out that, you know, the ionosphere is one part of it, but we're all part of this like big space weather system. And in this big space weather system, you have the Earth, you have the Earth's magnetic field called the magnetosphere, and then you have out here you have the sun, and the sun is constantly blowing the solar wind and sending energy towards the Earth. You know, the ionosphere is being ionized. What's very interesting here is that the Earth's magnetic field, it actually can act as wires out in space. So you can get charged particles from the sun streaming along these wires or along these magnetic field lines. And those magnetic field lines eventually reach down into the atmosphere. Where do you see them all reaching? Where is that? Yeah, the poles, right? So all these magnetic field lines are going down to the poles. So you get, you know, perhaps much more activity in the polar regions in the ionosphere than you do, say, that's the reason this is manifested by this. When charged particles stream along those field lines, dump into the poles, what do you get? The Aurora Borealis in the north, and in the south you get the Aurora Australis. And so when I did end up going to graduate school and studying space weather, I got to go on a lot of very interesting trips. And they all went to rather cold places. And this is why, because that magnetosphere puts those magnetic field lines into the poles, and so a lot of space physics is concentrated in that region. So that's why you're going to see a lot of the photos I will show you today are prompted by my desire to study ham radio further, ended up sending me to these really cold places. So in graduate school, I worked for a group on a project called the Super Dual Auroral Radar Network, or SuperDARN. Now, how many people here stand up if you know about SuperDARN? You better stand up. Okay, we have one person. She's my student, so of course she knows. Great. Yeah, so SuperDARN radars are actually ionospheric radars. They operate between 8 and 20 megahertz, so the same bands. They actually usually don't transmit on the ham radio frequencies, but on the same bands, 8 to 20 megahertz, for the purposes of studying the ionosphere. And they are in the northern hemisphere up here, in the southern hemisphere over there. And I went to graduate school at Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech operates a number of the radars in the northern hemisphere there, and they're friends with the other institutions that operate some of the ones in the south. So here's a picture of what a SuperDARN radar looks like. This is a picture I took down at McMurdo Station in Antarctica. And you see the transmitting array here. There's another receiving array over here. This actually transmits and receives. That receives only. And you can see, so this is a phased array. Beautiful scenery, absolutely gorgeous. Most SuperDARN radars operate between 8 to 20 megahertz, and they put out about 13 kilowatts of power. So in the science field, sometimes you get to operate with a little bit more power than you do as just a regular ham radio operator. So it's kind of fun. But the reason I was there to take this picture was because of this. How many people have had bad luck with weather and antennas? The scientists do too. So a nice storm kind of knocked down our poles. So I was on a team that had to go down to McMurdo Station to help fix that. So a lot of my science work was actually going and doing antenna work in, cold or strange places. So I flew out of Newark Airport, and then I took a very, very, very long flight down to Christchurch, New Zealand, where is located the International Antarctic Center. And from there, you take a C-130 down to Ross Island, which is down here, McMurdo Station. And you can see it's a volcanic island. There's Mount Erebus right there, the volcano. McMurdo Station's over there. It's the world's southernmost active volcano. And there we finally landed. So there's McMurdo Station from the satellite view. So these are some pictures from my trip. Here's what the U.S. Antarctic Program passenger terminal looks like. Our boarding passes looked a little bit different than the ones you probably used to get here, and so did our airplane. The seats were not quite as comfortable as the seats you had, but we did get to go up and look over the pilot's shoulder as they were going down. And they gave us earplugs because it was very loud. But you can see Mount Erebus from the plane. When you land, this is the view you get. Again, here's Mount Erebus. You can see how huge that volcano is. Here's Castle Rock. It's hard to see in the video or on the TV screen here, but you can actually see if you look up close, McMurdo Station, which is the largest Antarctic research station, is right there. And here's an aerial view of it. There's the main building where the cafeteria is, perhaps the most important building. There are the dormitories, Discovery Hut, and the Super Darn radar is located somewhere over here. This is another really cool picture from there. This building right there is actually now 122 years old. It was built by Robert Scott in 1902. It's called the Discovery Hut, and so it's like a landmark, a museum. You can actually go in there. And I was staying in the dormitories over here, so you could walk from there to there and then go visit the Discovery Hut. And you also get to see lots of wildlife, so nice seals. And of course, everyone wants to see a penguin. But as I said, all of these trips, I had a big motivation to go either be there because of ham radio or to see ham radio, and so this is no exception. McMurdo Station in Antarctica has a long history with ham radio. In fact, ham radio operators that have run phone patches for the people who helped build the station and operate the station in the past, they've actually had ridges and, say, mountains named after them. And I think that's really neat. Here's what the station looked like, at least back in 2014, KC4 USV. And here's what inside looked like. I was really lucky that year because it was the 100th anniversary of the ARRL. So W1AW turned into W100AW, and I actually got to make a QSO with them. So that sounded pretty good. But I also did some CW while I was down there. And even if you don't know CW, you probably do know that most of the CW has a nice pure tone to it. Listen to this. Listen to this transmission. It's going to sound a little funny. Did you hear how wild and crazy the pitch fluctuations were? Do you know what's causing that?
Sounded like a digital mode.
It almost sounded like a digital mode, right? But auroral flutter, right? So yeah, so right when that QSO was taking place, the auroral electrojet, right, which is plotted right here, that was starting to climb, so we're starting to get auroral activity. So it's really neat. You can really hear the space weather in the amateur radio transmissions. So I made this recording down in Antarctica. Of course, that happens more often there. But even here in the United States, you can get those same sorts of features. Was it 2 weeks ago, was CQ World Prefix CW contest? There was a major auroral event that weekend, and I had people emailing me saying that just going from one coast to the other in the continental United States, they heard that sort of auroral flutter. So it's really neat. If you know what to listen for, you can have some idea of what's going on out in space. I think it's amazing, how small the world is, or ham radio is a lot about networking. So while I was down there, I had one person send me this QSL card, and I thought this was one of the coolest QSL cards I ever received, because if you read it, the person who sent me this QSL card was actually on Operation Deep Freeze, and in 1955 and 1956. Operation Deep Freeze is the U.S. government mission that actually installed and built the research bases down in Antarctica. So from my just being there and participating in the ham radio activities down in Antarctica, I now have this really awesome QSL card, written by someone who actually helped to build the place. So JW7M, this is another really interesting, this is now the other side of the world. So when I first got my HF privileges in the year 2000, I got on the radio and I worked JW7M. This is the QSL card. And I went to my local ham radio club, and my ham radio club said, "Oh, wow, that's a really special place. Do you know who you worked?" I'm like, "No, I didn't know what that was at the time. I was new." They're like, "That's Svalbard. There's more polar bears than people up there." And my dad, he was so taken by this. He's like, "Wow, Svalbard, that's really cool." I was still in high school at that point. He's like, "You should go and see if there's a college up there. Maybe you can go study up there." I swear, he said this. Okay, so fast forward like 10 years, and I'm sitting in the lab at Virginia Tech, and this guy walks into the lab, and he goes, "Hi, my name is Chelmar. I'm a professor from Svalbard." My jaw just dropped to the floor. It just dropped to the floor. And it ended up that he wanted a student to go and study at the University of Svalbard. So I did end up getting 6 credits towards my PhD from the University in Svalbard. And so where is Svalbard? Well, here's Norway. Svalbard is all the way up here, and the North Pole is up here. So this is about as people will start ski expeditions from here to go to the North Pole. So that's where we're going. This is what the University Center on Svalbard looks like. A lot of you are either going to college soon or are in college or thinking about grad school. This isn't the type of university that you would go earn your bachelor's degree at, but it is a type of university where you might spend a semester abroad at. Or you might do a few graduate credits or even undergraduate credits. So if this is something that interests you, you can go take a look at them, and you might too be able to go up there. So I was very interested in this place because they had the Svalbard Incoherent Scatter Radar up there. This is a radar system that you see over here, operates around 500 megahertz, has a 1 megawatt peak power. I think I read it takes like they actually have to call the power company to tell them to put more coal in the power plant before they can turn on. So they have to get permission from the power company before they can turn on. And here I am jumping in front of the radar. This is what my dormitory looked like. There's the Aurora. This is the moon at night looking at one of the other dormitories. Absolutely stunning. Great student crowd. So if you do get an opportunity to do this, I strongly recommend it. You get to participate, or I got to participate in avalanche drills where they were practicing for what happens if there's an avalanche, and they had helicopters on the glaciers and things like that. You got to go out on these wild trips, and you'd have dog sleds going along, and you'd get to buy your own snowmobile and drive that around the Arctic. And of course there are seals, just like in Antarctica, but these are different kinds of seals. These are ring seals instead of metal seals. And then what do you think that is in the middle there? It's a polar bear, right? So yeah, that's the polar bear, one of the polar bears we saw on our trip. So that's neat. And of course, what else do you need on any of these trips? We have wildlife, we have exotic sites. What else do you need? A radio, that's right. You don't need a jacket as long as you have a ham radio. We all learned that the radio transmitters here kept the building warm. Same thing there, right? So yes, you need radio. So up in Svalbard, you have JW5 Echo, which you can rent out and you can operate from. And then here's the window. And if you go up close to the window and you look out, this is the view. So it's pretty neat. Okay. And one other trip I did during graduate school, I went to a place called Adak Island. So here's my QSL card from Adak Island. We went there to actually build this super darn radar. So before we got there, the radar wasn't there. When we left, there was a radar there. And Adak Island is located halfway between Russia and mainland Alaska. It's in the Aleutian Islands right here. Here's the airplane. Has anyone seen the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty? When he lands in, I think, Greenland. It felt a lot like that giant airplane, little airport, but absolutely beautiful. Here is the abandoned military housing that we rented. And you could walk along the shores of Adak, absolutely beautiful. This is a fishing vessel that was right off the shore I took a picture of. And here's our antenna kit. So, for those of you who like doing antenna work, we had to put this together. We had these little things that would go on top of the antennas. They're kind of spiky. What's that?
Static dissipation.
Yeah, sorry, static dissipation. So helps to prevent lightning strikes and also prevents the bald eagles from roosting on top of your antennas, which I'll show you in a minute. I thought they were kind of pretty, so I took a close-up. And here I am, working on the electronics hut. We have the static dissipation things on all of the antenna posts except for here where you can see the bald eagle roosting. So Adak was really neat because there are a lot of bald eagles there. It also rains a lot, so you get a lot of rainbows. It was a lot of fun. Here we are working on the radar electronics. There's the radar electronics working, and there's the actual radar. And of course, we had to bring along with the actual research radar, we needed our ham radios. So my buddy Kevin Stern, KJ40AP, and I, we operated this station. There's the antenna. We actually borrowed the mast from my friend Ethan, KAGU, who I met for the very first time on this trip. But as I said, it was quite rainy, so we did have to contend with the weather. And this is poor Kevin after our antenna blew over from all the rain and the wind on Adak. But this Adak trip was actually a very, very important trip for me and for what would eventually become HamSci, because that was the first time I had learned of CW skimmer and the RBN. How many people here know what the RBN is? Raise their hand. A few people. Okay, the RBN is awesome. RBN stands for Reverse Beacon Network, and it's a network of automated software-defined radios located around the world that if you call CQ using CW, they will automatically spot you, and you can actually see your call sign flash on this screen. So if you don't learn any other CW, at some point learn how to call CQ, 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 DE, your call sign, and then send that out a few times and go to this website and you'll actually see your call sign pop up on the frequency. And what's amazing about this is once I learned about that, I'm like, I bet we can do some science with that. I bet we can see space weather in this data. And not only in the Reverse Beacon Network, but also in WhisperNet and PSK Reporter, which are similar systems but for digital modes, not just for Morse code. And so I said, well, what do I think is the easiest thing we can see? I bet we can see effects of a solar flare in there. Who knows what happens if you get a solar flare and you're on HF? Yes? It wipes your signal out. You can't hear anything. And we call that a radio blackout. And so I downloaded data from that website right before a solar flare. So here's an example of that. There are 13,245 radio paths being observed on HF. 7.3 class. Yes. Yeah, but a particular kind of disturbance. So what happens is that X-ray energy tends to ionize the D region of the ionosphere, which is the layer closest to. And you know that the D region is known for absorbing radiation rather than refracting. So that's why sometimes you hear it called the darn D region, at least for HF. Because it absorbs those signals. So the solar flares will enhance that D region, your signals get absorbed, and then they disappear. And here's another way to plot that same data. So here's the X-ray measurements from the GOES spacecraft. You can see one X-class solar flare here, another X-class solar flare here. And then down here I have the 7 megahertz RBN and WhisperNet data from over Europe. And you can see that things are going along on 7 megahertz just fine. Boom, first flare, they go away. It comes back, second solar flare, boom, goes away. And then gradually it comes back. You can see that the US isn't nearly affected as much in this particular case because the US is actually still at night when the solar flares are hitting. So the Earth is actually shielding the US from the solar flare effects. But Europe is in broad daylight. So this dotted line here, when it's highest up, that's noon. So that's in broad daylight, so that's most affected. So another really neat project we did with the amateur radio data was during the 2017 solar eclipse. Did anyone go see the solar eclipse? Yeah? Great. Anyone participate in the solar eclipse QSO party? We have.
No, we did the receiver, we made the receiver.
You made a receiver?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so that was like Eclipse Mob?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, so we have people who participated in it. So a solar eclipse is where the moon goes in front of the sun and the shadow of the moon hits the earth and creates like temporary darkness. So back in 2017, we had one go clear across the United States, starting up in the northwest and leaving in the southeast. And it was took place over a 4-hour period. And I said, I bet we can see the eclipse effects in the amateur radio data. And so I worked with a bunch of other people, like Ward Silver and the ARRL, and we put together this solar eclipse QSO party, or the SEQP. And we made it contest-like, so it was like an amateur radio contest during the eclipse. And these are the CW reverse speaking network results for this. And here you can see all the little black dots are the CW transmitter stations. All the blue stars are the RBN receivers. And the colored dots are all the observations made by the RBN color-coded by how much shadow there was. And so, sure enough, you can see these observations. This is the 14 megahertz 20 meter data. This is right during the eclipse. That's an hour and a half before, hour and a half after. You can see that before the eclipse took place, there was a lot of communications on 20 meters. When the eclipse was happening, 20 meters shut down because the shadow of the moon caused the ionosphere to go into like temporary night-like conditions. The 20 meter 14 megahertz rays escaped into space and the communications essentially stopped. When the eclipse went away and the sun came back, things recovered. And we were able to take outputs from an ionospheric model called SAMI-3 provided to us by people at the Naval Research Laboratory. And we were actually able to model what happened. So our model results actually matched very well with the observations. So that was really cool. So it's nice as we have another opportunity to do this. In October 14th, 2023, there's going to be an annular solar eclipse. And then April 8th, 2024, there's going to be one more total solar eclipse over the United States. So we're trying to do this one more time. Last example of science I want to show you for tonight. I spent of time when I was working on my PhD looking at these things called traveling. You can see is a model of the ionosphere. I have it perturbed with this wave-like structure that's moving from north to south. And this is a very common sort of phenomena that happens. You see this mostly in, say, November, December, in the winter months. If you were to look at the vertical cut, at the ray trace diagram, you can see the wave structure moving through. And this is a 14 megahertz wave. You can see that as these wave structures move through, it focuses some of the rays and defocuses some of the other rays. Now, if you're sitting in a spot where the rays are all focused, so here's the transmitter. Imagine you're a receiver out here. If you're sitting in this spot when the rays are all focused, what kind of signal do you think you hear? A strong signal, right? And if the rays are defocused, what do you hear? A weaker signal. So you can imagine that if you're a ham radio station, like if you're this week, if you hear a particular location nice and strong for about 15 minutes, and then they fade away, and then they come back about 15 minutes later, that could be one of these traveling atmospheric disturbances moving overhead. So in graduate school, I used super darn radars to study these things. And after graduate school, I was like, I wonder if we can see these same sorts of features in the amateur radio data. So it took a little while, but we finally figured out that yes, we can. We were able to plot the reverse beacon network, PSK reporter, and WhisperNet data in such a way that we have time on the bottom axis here. We have distance between transmitter and receiver on the y-axis here. And you can see how there's this little oscillation down at the bottom, that wiggle. That's about a 2.5 hour period. So that's a large-scale traveling ionospheric disturbance that is moving through over the entire United States and causing the ionosphere to essentially move up and down. One other way you can see this, did you know, so how many, raise your hand if you have a GPS, if you own a GPS in your phone, use that. And you always use that to figure out what? Your location or your direction. Did you know you can use it to find out other things besides your location? So we can actually, if you have a GPS receiver that can receive 2 different frequencies, which is kind of a specialized GPS, but if you had one, you could actually figure out how many electrons are between you on the ground and the GPS satellite up in space. And the way that happens is the GPS that can receive 2 frequencies can measure the time delay between the 2 frequencies, and that time delay is a function of how many electrons. So you now have a way of actually measuring the ionospheric total electron count. And so there are actually GPS and GNSS receivers all over the United States that are fixed to the ground. We know where their location is, so their job is to do things like figure out how many electrons are in the sky. And so I got a bunch of that data. I got a map of that during this particular time. And do you see how there's this red band right up here? And you see how there's a blue band here? And you see how there's another red band over here? So this is that same wave we were looking at in the ham radio data just a couple of minutes ago. And I'm going to show you a movie next where you can actually see that when the United States is mostly red, that means higher electron density count, the distance for ham radio communications is going to be a little bit shorter because you get more refraction. And when the United States looks more blue, the distance is going to be farther out for the HF communications because there's less refraction. So let's take a look at this movie. So here you can see the United States is going to turn red in a minute as we have the skip distance coming closer. And now it's going out, so it's more blue. There it's more red again as it's coming in. And more blue as it's going out. And you can see all of these interesting wave structures up there. And so as you're on the radio this week, as you're operating right over there or in the hotel and you hear all of these strange noises come in, try to imagine that, all of these complex processes in the ionosphere, they're causing a lot of the irregularities and the strange noises that you're hearing as you're operating. I think it's really neat to think about. So I've been very fortunate so far. I really am a person who's gotten to essentially do my hobby as my career, and I'm fortunate that I really like doing that. And I think all of you are in a position, you're young, you are in a position to do something similar. Maybe it's in ham radio, maybe it's in some other passion that you have. Whatever your passion may be, try to follow it. Try to think about creative ways that you might be able to use it to make your life better, to make the lives of people around you better. And I really do believe if you are creative and you're persistent, you can do this. So I guess some of my closing thoughts are, where will your life take you? I'd love to know. How will you follow your passion? What will you discover? How will you help others? I also want you to remember it's not always easy. I've been incredibly fortunate, but there's been a tremendous amount of pain in my life too. I have some medical things which are extremely painful. I've had, some other personal things that losses. We all have. Everybody does. But we don't want to let those things define us. We still want to find ways to really do great things. And I really believe we can. So have faith, show interest and perseverance, be kind to others, love your family, believe in what you're doing, and have fun. So thank you very much. What's that? No, I'm all done. Any questions? Yes.
With all you know about space weather,
Yes.
astrophysics propagation, ionosphere players, all this knowledge you have, very impressive. I would like for you to take a few seconds and say, before all this stuff was known as well as it was, how did the guys back there do it so well 50 years ago?
Well, they knew a lot too. I mean, there's a lot of trial and error, a lot of experimentation. But if you go back and you can go back you can go scholar.google.com and you can go read these papers that ionospheric physicists were writing back in 1920s, 30s, 40s. There are some really smart people out there, and they were able to develop a tremendous amount of theory and do the math, and it's really amazing. If you want a good comprehensive history of this, there's a couple of things you can do. So first of all, we have an annual HamSci workshop, and at this past HamSci workshop, our keynote speaker was Dr. Chen-Pen Yang from the University of Toronto, and he's a radio historian. And so he actually chronicles in his talk how a lot of this was discovered. So you can go to hamsci.org, click on media, you can go watch his talk. He also has a great book called Probing the Sky with Radio Waves. But yeah, people started with experimentation. They asked questions. They developed mathematical theories. They tried to see, do those mathematical theories actually match the observations? And they kept iterating. And amateur radio actually played a big part in this. At the very beginning of the history, they did not understand ionospheric skip at all. And the transatlantic propagation tests between the US and the UK, which we're just celebrating the 100th and 101st anniversary of right now, those were some of the key observations that helped scientists to understand this today, or 100 years ago. Yeah?
So with the GPS GNSS, is there a possibility that you can actually use that to basically use that as like a sort of bandpass filter on a radio? So then you can basically, like with a sound file, you can play a clip of a certain sound that you hear, and then put that into the audio file, and basically mute out that sound, the background noise, so then you have a clear.
So you're trying to create like a feedback loop so that
Yeah.
you can get better HF communications based on what you're.
And would you be able to do that as a sort of like bandpass filter?
In real time?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if bandpass filter is the right term, but I think the concept is interesting. I don't know. I think it would be. I think there's a big research project in that. So I think it's an idea that could be followed up and looked at more. I don't know that right now. I do know that a lot of those stations those GPS stations that are permanently in the ground, they're reference stations, and they are actually creating a feedback loop for the GPS system. So when there's a bunch of space weather that happens, the GPS system becomes inaccurate. So those reference stations on the ground can measure those errors, and they can feed it back into the system and provide a correction system. So they're already doing something like that for GPS stations. I don't know, to my knowledge, and I don't work in the classified world or anything like that, but to my knowledge that has not been implemented for HF, but it sounds like an interesting idea.
Congratulations, there's your thesis project.
Anything else? Well, I'd like to thank you so much for having me. I will be here until Tuesday. I will be happy to talk to you some more. I've now been a ham for 24 years, and believe me, it feels like just yesterday I got into this, and I really appreciated the pictures of when you were young, and it just goes by so fast. But I think all of you, coming to this event, I think you're all on the right track, just going out and saying yes to opportunities that come your way, because that's really how I did it too. I had a lot of good opportunities come my way. I said yes, and just keep going from there. So thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
All right. Oh, we got to show the club here. So, gotta get Veronica up here. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nathaniel, for coming. I know you've got a big schedule this summer, and thanks for doing that. Okay. So. We are going to say goodbye to our online folks. So thanks for tuning in and watching our opening ceremonies. But this concludes the opening ceremonies. Be sure to listen for us on the air. W2NAF will be on the air a lot tomorrow, so make sure you're listening for us. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a break. So if you haven't been to the restrooms,